There is a room on the 6th floor of Emory Children's Hospital that smells like latex gloves and the kind of quiet that means someone is about to hear something they cannot unhear. 2 plastic chairs, 1 rolling stool with a wobbly wheel that squeaks every time someone shifts their weight, and a hand hygiene poster on the wall that features a cartoon germ wearing a top hat and a monocle, as if bacterial infections are something out of a Charles Dickens novel. That poster has been there since at least 2012. I know because there is a crease in the bottom left corner that has yellowed with age, and someone once stuck a smiley face sticker on the germ's top hat, and nobody has removed it. This is the kind of detail you notice when you are sitting in a plastic chair trying not to think about the fact that your entire life is about to be rearranged by a woman holding a manila folder. I was in the chair closest to the door. I have always sat closest to the door. Every waiting room, every courtroom, every room where a man with authority was about to tell me something I did not want to hear. Closest to the door, not because I planned to run. Just because some part of me, the part that spent 11 years married to a man who controlled everything from the grocery list to the thermostat, that part always wanted to know where the exit was. Old habits, the kind that keep you alive and also keep you sad. Dr. Priscilla Nwosu set a file on her desk and went quiet. Not regular quiet, the kind of quiet that has furniture in it, the kind you can sit inside of and feel the walls pressing in. She looked at that file the way a surgeon looks at a scan, when the news is not what anyone ordered. Calm face, controlled breathing. Eyes moving across the page one more time, like she was hoping the numbers would rearrange themselves into something easier to say. My ex-husband, Jordan, was standing against the far wall with his arms crossed, doing that thing he does where he puffs out his chest because he thinks it makes him look like a man in charge of the situation. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my rent. His jaw was set in that position he uses when he is trying very hard to appear calm, while his insides are doing something else entirely. I have seen that jaw position at parent-teacher conferences, at Thanksgiving dinners, and once at a Costco when they ran out of the rotisserie chickens he had specifically driven 14 miles to buy. The man has range, but only in the direction of controlled irritation. His wife Meredith sat in the other plastic chair near the door. Not next to me, near the door on the other side, like we were 2 magnets with the same charge. She had her legs crossed at the ankle and her hands folded in her lap, and she was watching Dr. Nwosu the way a woman watches another woman when she already knows something is wrong, but has not yet decided how wrong. Meredith had a talent for being in rooms without fully arriving in them, present but withheld. Like she was always saving her real reaction for later, when she had privacy and a locked bathroom door. Dr. Nwosu opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again and looked at me first, which is the moment I knew whatever she was about to say was going to land on Jordan like a piano from a 5th-story window. Because doctors do not look at the calm person first unless they need a witness. Jordan uncrossed his arms. "What is it?" She did not look at him. I will get to what she said. 5 words. That is all it took to turn his entire life into a crime scene. But to understand why those 5 words mattered, to understand why they cracked open everything he had spent a decade cementing shut, you need to hear how we all ended up in that room. And trust me, it is a longer road than you would think. So let me take you back. Way back. 4 years before that 6th-floor room, I was earning $14.20 an hour as a billing assistant at an internal medicine clinic on North Tryon Street in Charlotte, North Carolina. If you have never been to Charlotte, it is the kind of city that calls itself the Queen City, with genuine pride, builds a new brewery every 6 minutes, and argues about vinegar-based versus tomato-based barbecue sauce with the same intensity other places reserve for religion and politics. My job was calling insurance companies and explaining, in the most polite voice I could manufacture at 8:30 in the morning, why a 57-year-old woman's colonoscopy was in fact covered under her plan, and no, the diagnostic code was not incorrect, and yes, I would hold. Again, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Turns out that is excellent training for arguing with a narcissist because both require you to stay calm while someone lies to you with total confidence and a hold music soundtrack. The senior nurse at the clinic, Wanda Price, was the first person who learned my name on my first day and used it like it mattered. She told me the coffee machine had been broken since February, that everyone used the Keurig in the back, and that I should never, under any circumstances, touch the French vanilla pods, because those belonged to Dr. Adebayo and he had a system and he would know. Wanda was 50 years old, had a laugh that could rattle the ceiling tiles, cooked better than anyone I had ever met, and carried the kind of authority that comes from being the person who has worked somewhere so long that she knows where every file is buried, including the ones people wish she did not know about. She went to Mount Zion AME Church every Sunday, raised 2 boys mostly by herself after her husband died in 2018, and had the kind of friendship style where she would tell you your outfit was a disaster before you left the house and then hand you something better from her own closet. I did not know it yet, but that woman was going to pull me out of the deepest hole of my life in about 3 years. Not with a speech, not with a grand gesture, just quietly. The way the right person, at the right time, always does. With a pot of tea and a kitchen towel and a phone call to someone she knew from church. But before Wanda, before the clinic, before the apartment so small that my kitchen and bedroom had a custody agreement of their own, there was Jordan. And that is where this whole thing started to go wrong. His name was Jordan Webb. I changed 1 letter, and that is close enough for anyone who knows him to squint, and different enough for my lawyer to sleep at night. We met in October of 2012 at a housewarming party in the Dilworth neighborhood of Charlotte. One of those brick bungalows with the wraparound porch where people who just closed on their first mortgage stand around drinking craft beer and pretending they are not terrified of their monthly payment. I was 24. He was 28. I came with a coworker from a temp agency I was working at before the clinic job. She left after 40 minutes because her babysitter texted something alarming about the dog and the laundry basket. I stayed because the guacamole was good, and I did not feel like going back to my apartment where the only thing waiting for me was a basket of laundry I had been avoiding since Tuesday. Jordan walked up to me near the drink table. He was good looking in that way where, he played some kind of sport in high school and still tells the story about the game-winning catch at cookouts. Tall, clean shave. Smile that arrived a half second before the rest of his face, like it was scouting ahead to see if the room was worth charming. He bought me a vodka cranberry and told me I was too pretty to be stressed about money. I should have poured that drink down the front of his khakis. Instead, I gave him my number and let him walk me to my car and thought, well, at least this one has a job. He did have a job. District sales manager for a pharmaceutical equipment company. $118,000 a year plus a company car, a Nissan Maxima he kept detailed like it was a personality trait. He wore shirts with cuffs that needed links and owned more than one blazer that was not from a funeral. In Charlotte, that combination of salary and grooming gets you a reputation as a catch. In retrospect, it should have gotten him a warning label, but hindsight does not come with return receipts. We dated for 11 months. He was attentive. He was generous. He remembered my coffee order after the first date and brought it to me unasked on the second, which at the time felt romantic, and in hindsight was the first sign that he paid very close attention to things you did not ask him to notice. He opened car doors. He pulled out chairs. He once drove 45 minutes in the rain to bring me soup when I had the flu, and I remember lying on my couch thinking, this is what it feels like when someone takes care of you. I had not felt that before. Not from my father, who left when I was 6 and sent a birthday card exactly once, the wrong year, with the wrong age, addressed to Denise with a C. Not from anyone. So when Jordan said he wanted to take care of me, I believed him. That was the first lie. Or maybe it was the truth. And taking care of me just meant something different to him than it did to me. To me, it meant partnership. To him, it meant management. We got married in September of 2013 at a courthouse in Mecklenburg County, which, if you are keeping track, is the same courthouse where he would take my children from me 10 years later, so the universe has a sense of structure, if not a sense of mercy. Small ceremony. His mother came, my mother came. A few friends. Wanda sent a card with a $20 bill inside and wrote, "Praying for you, girl," which at the time I thought was a standard wedding blessing, and now I realize might have been a very specific warning from a woman who could read a situation the way other people read a weather forecast. His mother, Beverly Webb, treated me the way you treat a sofa you did not pick out, but are expected to sit on gracefully. Polite, correct, never warm. She was 61 at the time, silver hair she wore in a press that never moved, church hat collection that could fill a museum, and a handshake that communicated exactly how much of her attention you had earned, which in my case was roughly the amount you give to a restaurant menu you have already decided not to order from. At our wedding lunch, She told Jordan he looked handsome, told my mother the potato salad was interesting, which in the South is not a compliment, and told me that marriage was a marathon and she hoped I had the stamina. I smiled. I said thank you. I ate my potato salad, which was my mother's recipe and was excellent, and I filed that comment in the part of my brain where I keep things that hurt but are not yet large enough to fight about. The first year was fine. Fine is a word that means nothing and everything, depending on how tired you are when you say it. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in the University City area. Jordan handled the finances. He set up the joint account. He managed the budget. He gave me a debit card linked to the household account and explained calmly and reasonably that it was easier if one person tracked the spending. That way, nothing got missed. That way, they could save for a house. That way, things stayed organized. I agreed because it sounded logical and because I was 25 and had never had someone else offer to handle the math of being alive, and I did not yet understand that when one person controls all the money, they control all the choices. I had his phone password by the end of the first week because he gave it to me casually, like it was nothing. I did not have his because I never asked, and he never offered, and I never questioned it, because questioning Jordan was not something that felt necessary yet. It would, but not yet. He had opinions about how I loaded the dishwasher, about what I wore to his company dinners, about how often I called my sister, who lived in Raleigh, and who Jordan said talked too much about nothing, which was his way of saying she talked too much about things he could not control. He wrapped every opinion in a smile and a suggestion. Maybe try it this way. I just think this looks better on you. I'm not saying do not call her. I'm saying maybe not every night. It was never a demand. It was always a nudge. And the thing about nudges is that they are so small, you do not notice you have been moved until you look up and realize you are standing somewhere you never agreed to be. But the thing about a man who wants to take care of everything is that eventually everything includes you. And the thing about control is that it works best when you do not see it coming. By 2014, we were trying for kids. And that is when Jordan made a phone call that would change everything. I just did not know about it yet. By 2014, we had been trying for a baby for 8 months. Trying is a word that sounds optimistic until you have peed on 39 sticks at 2 in the morning and started Googling things on an empty stomach that no human being should ever read while emotionally vulnerable and holding a glass of wine. Ovulation calendars. Basal body temperature charts, a deeply unsettling forum where strangers discuss cervical mucus with the enthusiasm of wine sommelier describing a Burgundy. 8 months of scheduled, clinical, profoundly unsexy effort that makes you resent your own body for treating reproduction like an advanced placement exam you did not study for. Jordan's solution was to suggest I relax more, take a bath, do some yoga, maybe stop stressing, because apparently my uterus was just tense and needed a spa day. My solution was to see a specialist, which I mentioned once over dinner, and he dismissed the way he dismissed most of my suggestions, with a long exhale and a sentence that started with, "I just think." 3 weeks later, he changed his mind. Not because I convinced him, because he had already made the phone call. He came home on a Tuesday, and I will pause here to note that Tuesdays in my life have a pattern of delivering things I did not ask for, and said he had talked to a buddy from college, a doctor, fertility specialist, guy named Brent Stafford. They had been in the same Morehouse alumni group, played golf together a few times a year at a course in Peachtree City, and apparently during one of those rounds, somewhere between the 7th hole and the clubhouse, Jordan had told Stafford we were having trouble conceiving, and Stafford had said he could help. I remember asking Jordan when this golf conversation had happened. He said a while ago. I asked why he had not mentioned it before. He said he wanted to look into it first. I asked what looking into it meant. He said he had already made an appointment. For both of us. Next Thursday. In Atlanta. I sat there with a forkful of roasted chicken halfway to my mouth, thinking about how the man who told me to just relax had apparently been arranging medical consultations on a golf course without mentioning it to the person whose body was actually involved. But I wanted a baby. I wanted a baby so badly that I swallowed the chicken, swallowed the irritation, and said okay. Peachtree Reproductive Center was on the 2nd floor of a medical office building on Peachtree Dunwoody Road, which, if you are keeping track, is a different Peachtree than Peachtree City, where they played golf, because Atlanta has approximately 900 streets named Peachtree, and local navigation requires either a GPS or an ancestral blessing. The waiting room had beige walls, a water feature that sounded like a bathroom faucet someone forgot to turn off, and a stack of magazines so old the cover of one still had a headline about the royal wedding. The first one, Dr. Brent Stafford, came out to greet us personally, which I now understand was not standard practice, but at the time seemed like Southern hospitality. He was mid-30s, tall, clean-cut, the kind of man who irons his lab coat. He shook Jordan's hand the way men shake hands when they share something, a fraternity, a secret, a golf handicap, with that extra second of grip and the eye contact that says we are in this together. He shook my hand normally, politely. The way you shake hands with someone you are about to do something to, not with. I did not notice the difference at the time. I notice it now. Every time I replay it, I notice it more. The process was explained to me in a small consultation room with a plastic model of a uterus on the desk that looked like it had been manufactured by someone who had never actually seen one. Stafford walked us through the IVF protocol, hormone injections, egg retrieval, fertilization, transfer. He used words like optimize and protocol and success rates, and I nodded because I trusted the man my husband trusted, and that is the kind of sentence that only sounds reasonable until it ruins your life. There was paperwork, a lot of paperwork. Consent forms, medical history forms, financial disclosure forms, insurance authorization forms. I sat in that room with a pen and a stack of documents and sticky arrows pointing to every line where my signature was needed. I signed where the arrows pointed. That is what you do when you trust someone. You follow the arrows. You do not read every word of every page, because the man next to you is nodding along, and the doctor across from you is smiling, and the whole room feels like it is moving towards something good, and you do not want to be the person who slows it down by asking questions. I would later find out that the form I signed and the form Jordan signed were not the same document, not even close, but I am getting ahead of myself. That revelation is coming. And when it arrives, it will arrive the way a freight train arrives at a stalled car on the tracks, with absolute certainty and no interest in negotiation. The first cycle failed. $19,200. Jordan's parents covered half. His mother, Beverly, wrote the check and handed it to Jordan at Sunday dinner without looking at me, as though the money was a transaction between the Webb family and God, and I was simply the equipment. I thanked her. She said, which in the South can mean anything from you are welcome to I am tolerating your existence with great effort. Context suggested the latter. The second cycle worked. Nyla came into the world in late October of 2015, on a Tuesday, because of course she did. She came out screaming like she was already furious about something. Fists balled, face scrunched, lungs working at a volume that startled the nurse and made Jordan take a step back from the delivery table, which was the most honest thing he had done in months. 2 years later, Miles arrived in the spring of 2017, quieter, calmer. He came out looking around the room like he was conducting a preliminary assessment and had not yet decided whether this place met his standards. The nurse said he was an easy baby. She was right. He was easy the way water is easy. It just goes where the path takes it. I held them both, not at the same time. My arms were not built for simultaneous newborn management, and I thought, this is it. This is what I was always supposed to do. Not billing, not insurance codes, not arguing with automated phone systems about prior authorizations. These two small, loud, bewildering humans who smelled like milk and laundry detergent, and the kind of hope that makes you stupid enough to believe everything is going to be fine. I did not know yet that the paper I signed in that Atlanta clinic, the one with the sticky arrows, was going to be the thing that almost took them away from me. I did not know that the form sitting in a file cabinet 4 hours south had my name on a lie and the truth on a document I never saw. But that room on the 6th floor, the one with the latex gloves and the cartoon germ in the top hat, was still years away, and the road to get there had not started hurting yet. The marriage did not break. It sagged, like a ceiling with a water stain you keep meaning to fix but never do because you are too busy mopping the floor underneath it. You put a bucket down. You move the furniture. You tell yourself it is not that bad. And then one morning, you are standing in the kitchen making oatmeal for 2 toddlers, and a chunk of plaster the size of a dinner plate falls into the sink, and you realize the damage was never in the ceiling, it was in the pipes, and it had been leaking for years. By 2018, Jordan had opinions about everything. Not the kind that start conversations, the kind that end them. How I loaded the dishwasher, what I wore to his company events, how often I called my sister in Raleigh. He once told me a green blouse made me look washed out, and I stopped wearing green for 2 years before I realized that a grown woman had let a man eliminate an entire color from her wardrobe and called it compromise. He checked the grocery receipts. Every week, he would sit at the kitchen table with a pen and circle items he considered unnecessary. $7 for oat milk, $5 for a magazine, $4.50 for organic apple juice the kids actually liked. He would hold up the receipt and say, "We are not poor, but we are not careless either," and hand it back to me like a graded exam I had failed. Meanwhile, his corporate card covered dinners I was never invited to, a gym membership with a sauna and a juice bar and a golf club fee that made me sit down when I saw the statement. The man spent $14 on a single smoothie. But my $5 People magazine was the budget problem. Sure, he monitored my phone, not by taking it. By knowing the password, which I had given freely early in the marriage because I had nothing to hide and did not understand that giving someone access to everything is not intimacy, it is inventory. He would casually mention things I had texted my sister at 11 at night while he was supposedly asleep. He read my messages the way a security guard reads a logbook looking for irregularities. He limited my time with people, never overtly. He said things like, "You seem really tired lately and Wanda is great, but you two went out twice this week and the kids missed you." It was always about my well-being, except the result was always the same. I saw fewer people, I went fewer places. The world got smaller, and he stood at the center of it like a man who had rearranged the furniture and wanted credit for the new layout. Beverly made it worse. Thanksgiving 2019, she sat at Jordan's dining table, watched me carry in a sweet potato casserole I had spent 3 hours making, and said, "You look tired, dear." Motherhood is not for everyone. She said it the way you say "bless your heart" in the South, which is to say she slid a knife between my ribs while smiling and passing the gravy. I looked at Jordan. He was cutting turkey. He did not look up. In his family, his mother's cruelty was simply the weather, and you do not argue with the weather. That comment lived inside me like a splinter I could not reach. I repeated it on bad days. I repeated it when Nyla threw a tantrum at Target and an older woman in checkout gave me a look that said everything Beverly had said but louder. I repeated it when I put Miles's shoes on the wrong feet and did not notice until we were halfway to daycare. Jordan suggested I see a therapist. He said, I seemed stressed. Maybe it would help to talk to someone. He said it with that soft voice he used when he was being his most dangerous, the voice that sounded like concern but functioned like a setup. I went. I talked. I told a licensed professional about my anxiety, my exhaustion, my feeling that I was failing at everything, and every honest word I said was being recorded in a file that his lawyer would later wave in front of a judge like a flag. In 2021, my mother was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. She was living in Raleigh on a fixed income with no supplemental insurance. The bills arrived like weather events, sudden, massive, and completely indifferent to whether you could afford them. I picked up a second job. Evenings and Saturday mornings at a restaurant called The Porch on East Boulevard, running food and smiling at people who tipped 11% and thought they were generous. Jordan did not help, not financially, not emotionally. He said my mother should have planned better. He said I was stretching myself too thin and it was affecting the kids. What he meant was it was affecting him because the house was not as clean and dinner was not as regular and I was not as available to be managed. In March of 2022, I collapsed at The Porch during a Saturday brunch shift. 1 minute, I was carrying a tray of mimosas to table 14. The next minute, I was on the floor looking up at the ceiling fan, wondering why it had 3 blades instead of 4. 3 days at Atrium Health Mercy. Exhaustion, dehydration, anemia. A nurse told me my body had simply decided it was done negotiating and had called a meeting without my permission. Jordan visited once. He stayed 11 minutes. I counted because the clock on the wall was directly above his head, and I had nothing else to measure. He did not bring flowers. He did not bring the kids. He brought a business card, cream-colored. Embossed. Richard Odom, family law attorney, Charlotte, North Carolina. He set it on the bedside table next to my cup of ice chips and said, "I think we need to have a conversation." Then he left. 11 minutes. I stared at that business card for a long time. The font was serif. The paper was heavy. It felt expensive, which made sense, because everything Jordan used to dismantle my life had always been expensive. I did not know it yet, but that hospital stay, 3 days, 2 IV bags, and one deeply unfortunate conversation with a nutritionist about my sodium intake was going to become Exhibit B in his custody case. The therapy sessions were Exhibit A. My social media posts about being tired were Exhibit C. He had been collecting evidence the way other people collect stamps, quietly, methodically, with the patience of a man who had already decided the outcome and was simply building the file to match. He was not visiting his wife. He was closing a case. Jordan's lawyer was the kind of man who wore cufflinks to a custody hearing and said, "Your Honor," like he was tipping a valet. Richard Odom. Corner office on South Tryon Street with a view of the skyline and a receptionist who offered you sparkling water from a glass bottle, not a plastic one, because Richard Odom's clients were the kind of people who could taste the difference and cared. His shoes were polished. His briefcase was leather. His handshake probably had a billing code. I got a legal aid referral. My lawyer's name was Marcus Shelby. He was 31, had a coffee stain on his tie that he had tried to cover with a lapel pin, and shared an office with an immigration attorney and a woman who notarized documents and sold Avon on the side. Marcus was decent. Marcus was prepared. Marcus was also outgunned the way a bicycle is outgunned by a freight train, both technically vehicles. Only one of them is going to survive the intersection. The custody hearing lasted 2 days in Mecklenburg County Family Court, the same courthouse where Jordan and I had gotten married 10 years earlier, which is the kind of symmetry that would be poetic if it were not so cruel. I sat at a table on the left side of the courtroom. Jordan sat on the right. The distance between us was about 12 feet. It felt like a canyon. Jordan showed up in a suit that fit the way suits fit when someone has measured your body with a tape and charged 4 figures for the privilege. He was flanked by his mother, who somehow produced 3 character reference letters on cream-colored stationery with a watermark typed in a serif font, signed by a pastor, a neighborhood association president, and a woman from Beverly's Bridge Club who described Jordan as a pillar of moral integrity, which is a phrase that should require a permit. A co-worker of Jordan's took the stand and testified that he was the most devoted father he had ever seen. Devoted. The man once forgot to pick up the kids from soccer practice because he was watching a Panthers game at a sports bar on South Boulevard. Nyla sat on a bench outside the rec center for 40 minutes with her coach, who called me because Jordan's phone went to voicemail. But sure, devoted. Absolutely. Father of the century. Somebody engraved the trophy. Richard Odom presented the case like he was arranging flowers. Each exhibit placed precisely. Exhibit A, therapy records spanning 2 years, documenting anxiety, insomnia, feelings of inadequacy. Every honest thing I had ever told a licensed professional laid out on a table for a judge to read like a restaurant menu of my worst days. Exhibit B, hospital admission for exhaustion, 3 days, framed not as a woman working herself to collapse to pay her mother's cancer bills, but as evidence of a woman who could not handle the basic demands of her life. Exhibit C, social media posts. Screenshots of the time I posted, "Some days I do not know how other moms do it," which was meant as solidarity and was presented as confession. I showed up in a blouse from the clearance rack at a store I will not name because they do not deserve the association. It was pale blue. It was 3 sizes of nervous away from fitting right. And the tag was still on it. I did not notice until I was already seated. Marcus noticed. He did not say anything, but I saw his eyes move to the back of my collar and then away, the way you look at a crack in the ice and decide not to mention it because you are already standing on it. Marcus did his best. He argued that Jordan's income did not make him a better parent, that my therapy was a sign of responsibility, not instability, that my hospitalization was a consequence of overwork, not incompetence. He was clear, he was logical, and he lost. The judge awarded full custody to Jordan Webb, primary residence, decision-making authority, the whole thing. I got visitation every other weekend pending Jordan's cooperation, which as a legal concept is like saying you can breathe air pending the approval of the person holding the pillow. I also got $17,000 in cash settlement, a Toyota Corolla 2019 with a check engine light that had been on since August, and a slow leak in the rear left tire that I had been ignoring the way I had been ignoring every warning sign in my life, and a cardboard box of personal items. Inside that box were my grandmother's recipe binder, a picture frame with a crack down the middle that I had been meaning to fix, and a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Mom," that my sister Janelle had given me as a joke 3 Christmases ago. I almost threw it in the trash. I did not. Because sometimes the only honest thing you own is the one that hurts. The judge said the words, and the room kept going. Papers shuffled. Someone coughed. A phone vibrated in a pocket, and whoever it belonged to checked it, because even in the moment your life ends, someone else's life has a text message. I sat there looking at my hands and thinking this is what it sounds like when everything that mattered gets handed to someone who did not earn it, while the person who earned it sits in a clearance rack blouse with the tag still on. Jordan shook Richard Odom's hand in the hallway. Firm grip, big smile. The same handshake he had given Stafford in that fertility clinic lobby years ago. I did not know it yet, but those two handshakes were connected. Same grip, same confidence. Same lie underneath. I walked out of that courthouse carrying a cardboard box, and the kind of silence that settles inside you when everything you built just got awarded to the person who dismantled you. The check engine light came on before I made it out of the parking deck. Of course it did. Beverly was standing on the courthouse steps when I passed. She did not say a word. She did not need to. Her face said it all. It said, "I told you motherhood was not for everyone." That cream-colored stationery of hers, the one with the watermark and the serif font, was going to show up again, in a very different courtroom, under very different circumstances. And next time, she would not be writing the letters. She would be answering for them. My apartment in Noda was 612 square feet of what the listing described as a charming studio with character, which in real estate language means small, old, and the landlord is hoping your standards are low enough to call the water stain on the ceiling a conversation piece. $1,200 a month. One bedroom that shared a wall with the kitchen, which shared a wall with the bathroom, which shared a wall with a neighbor whose television was apparently bolted to the drywall on my side. The parking spot was gravel. Paved cost an extra $45 a month, and I did not have $45 a month to spend on the luxury of not getting rocks in my shoes every time I walked to my car. I moved in on a Thursday with a cardboard box, a suitcase, and a Toyota Corolla with a check engine light that had become less of a warning and more of a companion. The apartment had a window that faced the parking lot. From a certain angle, if I stood on my toes and leaned left, I could see a sliver of the skyline, which the landlord had proudly noted during the tour, as though a 2-inch view of a bank building was a selling point. The first night, I ate cereal out of the World's Okayest Mom mug, because I had not unpacked the bowls, and honestly, the mug felt appropriate. The neighbor's television came on at 7. Jeopardy! I could hear Alex Trebek through the wall like he was sitting in my kitchen. The answer was, what is the Strait of Magellan? I got it right. The contestant did not. I felt briefly superior, which was the most positive emotion I had experienced in 6 weeks. That became my routine. 7 o'clock. Jeopardy through the wall. Me, sitting on the edge of the bed that was also the couch, that was also the dining area, guessing answers to questions nobody had asked me, in an apartment where nobody was coming home. Some nights I got 7 right, some nights I got 12. I started keeping track on the back of a grocery receipt because I needed to win at something, even if the competition was just me and a wall. 3 weeks after the custody order, I was sitting in the Toyota in my gravel parking spot. It was almost dark. The check engine light was glowing orange on the dashboard, like a small, patient flame that had been waiting for me to pay attention to it for months. My phone buzzed. Jordan. They don't ask about you anymore. Stop calling. I read it 4 times. Each time, the sentence got heavier, like the words were filling with concrete. Then I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and stared at the check engine light until the sun went all the way down, and the only light in the car was that small orange circle on the dashboard, glowing like a question I could not afford to answer. I kept one photo of Nyla and Miles in my wallet, taken at a park in Charlotte the spring before the divorce. Nyla was squinting into the sun with her hand over her eyes like a tiny sea captain. Miles was mid-laugh, mouth open, one shoe untied. I looked at that photo so many times, the edges went soft from my thumbs. The lamination started peeling at the corner. I pressed it back down with my fingernail every time, like if I could keep the photo from falling apart, maybe I could keep myself from falling apart too. Jordan blocked my number. I called from the clinic phone once. He picked up, heard my voice, said they're busy in a tone that meant stop existing, and hung up. I sent letters. Handwritten, on lined paper, because I could not afford stationery and I was not Beverly Webb. 2 letters a month, addressed to Nyla and Miles Carter Webb at Jordan's house on Providence Road. None were returned. None were answered. I do not know if the kids ever saw them. I do not know if they were opened, thrown away, or stacked in a pile somewhere, collecting dust and good intentions. I sent them anyway. And then I started the voicemails. Every Sunday night at 8:15, I would sit on the edge of my bed, dial Jordan's number, wait for the voicemail I knew was coming because my number was blocked and the call rolled over automatically, and I would talk. I told them about my week. About the weather, which in Charlotte is either too hot or pretending to be spring when it is actually February. I told them about the lady at the Harris Teeter who got into a full argument with a cantaloupe because it was too soft and she wanted to speak to a manager about it. I told them about the time a patient at the clinic called to complain that his insurance would not cover a procedure, and when I asked what the procedure was, he said I would rather not say, and I spent 15 minutes negotiating coverage for something I was never allowed to know the name of. I told them I loved them, every single time. I said it at the end the same way, like a punctuation mark I refused to leave off. Good night, babies. Mama loves you. I will call you next Sunday. I did not know if the voicemails went anywhere. I did not know if they were saved or deleted or lost in whatever digital graveyard phones keep for the things nobody wanted to hear. I left them anyway. Every single Sunday, 8:15, for 3 years. Some days I cooperated with being alive. Some days I ate cereal for dinner and stared at the Jeopardy wall like it owed me money. Some days I sat in the Toyota in the gravel parking spot and listened to the engine tick and thought about how quiet a life can get when the 2 loudest people in it are on the other side of a court order. The days added up. Not because I was strong, not because I had a plan, because I did not have another option. And sometimes that is the only thing that keeps a person upright. Not courage, not faith. Just the absence of an alternative. That room on the 6th floor, the one with the latex gloves and the cartoon germ in the top hat, was still years away, and the road to get there was going to break me one more time before it gave me anything back. But first, it was going to give me something I had not had in a long time, a reason to keep standing. 3 years will either bury you or build you, and some weeks it does both before Wednesday. There were mornings I woke up and felt like a person who was going to be fine. There were nights I sat on the bathroom floor at 11:45 and was not sure I would make it to Thursday. The distance between those 2 states was sometimes 12 hours. Sometimes it was a single phone call that went to voicemail because the number I was dialing still did not recognize me as someone worth picking up for. But the days kept coming. That is the thing about time. It does not ask permission. It just shows up every morning like a coworker who does not read social cues, and eventually you have to get dressed and deal with it. Wanda did not let me disappear. I tried. She would not allow it. Every Tuesday, without fail, my phone would buzz with 2 things. A Bible verse, usually something from Psalms or Proverbs that she had probably picked because it rhymed or sounded particularly pointed, and a photo of whatever she was cooking that night. Collard greens, oxtails, a sweet potato pie that looked like it belonged in a museum, macaroni and cheese with a crust on top that I could practically smell through the screen. I never responded to the verse. I always responded to the food. Wanda knew this. I think the verse was bait, and the food was the hook, and the whole thing was a strategy disguised as friendship, which is the most Wanda Price thing in the world. By the 2nd year, Tuesday texts became Tuesday dinners. I would drive to her house on West Boulevard after work and sit at her kitchen table while she cooked, and her 2 boys argued about video games in the next room, and the house smelled like garlic and butter and the kind of warmth that comes from a home where people actually want to be. Wanda never asked me if I was okay. She asked me if I was eating, which was better, because "are you okay" is a question people ask when they want to feel helpful, and "are you eating" is a question people ask when they actually intend to solve the problem. She went to Mount Zion AME Church every Sunday. had been going since before her husband passed. She knew everyone in that congregation, the way a dispatcher knows every truck on the road, by name, by route, by how long it takes them to get where they are going. She introduced me to people at church potlucks, at fish fry fundraisers, at the annual Easter breakfast, where someone always made deviled eggs with paprika that looked beautiful and tasted like revenge. I did not know it yet, but that church network, that web of women who remembered names and kept favors and passed information the way other communities pass bread, was going to matter more than any lawyer I would ever hire. Specifically, Wanda knew a woman at Mount Zion named Gloria, who worked in medical records management at a hospital in Atlanta. But that connection would not matter for another 14 months. I am telling you about it now because when the moment comes, I want you to understand that it did not come from nowhere. It came from Tuesday dinners and church potlucks, and a woman who refused to let me eat alone. At the clinic, I got better. Then I got better than better. Dr. Adebayo, who still had his system with the French vanilla Keurig pods and still knew when someone had touched them, called me into his office in November of 2025. His office smelled like Febreze and the particular anxiety of a man who has a quarterly review coming and is not confident about the numbers. He told me I was being promoted to administrative coordinator, $49,500 a year. I almost asked him to repeat it, not because I did not hear it, because I needed a second pass to believe that a number with a 4 at the front was attached to my name. I did the math in the parking lot. I could afford groceries without checking the balance first. I could afford the parking spot with pavement. I could afford to stop Googling, how long does a check engine light stay on before the car actually explodes, and take the Toyota to a mechanic. I did not do that last one yet because old habits die hard, and I had developed a personal relationship with that orange light that I was not ready to end. $9,200 in savings, kept in a separate account at a credit union on Freedom Drive, not the bank Jordan and I used to share. I had learned that lesson the hard way. Separate accounts, separate banks, separate everything. 40-minute drive to a different branch, worth every mile. There is a kind of freedom in knowing that no one else's name is on your money. It is small, it is quiet, but it is yours. Wanda bought a cake from the grocery store bakery. White frosting, blue letters, congrats Denise. She spelled my name right on the first try, which she announced was her gift to me, and honestly, it was one of the better gifts I had received in recent memory, competing only with the fact that she also brought plastic forks, because she knew my kitchen drawer situation was unreliable. I laughed. I laughed the way you laugh when you have been holding your breath for 3 years, and someone hands you a cake with your name spelled correctly, and suddenly the air comes back. Things were quiet after that. Things were stable. I went to work. I came home. I left voicemails on Sundays at 8:15. I guessed Jeopardy answers through the wall. I had not heard Nyla's voice in 2 years and 7 months. I had not seen Miles in person since the courthouse steps. The photo in my wallet was starting to curl at the edges no matter how many times I pressed it flat. And then, on a Tuesday in late January, while I was standing in the office kitchen, heating up leftover mac and cheese in the microwave, my phone rang. Unknown number, area code 404, Atlanta. I almost did not pick up. The microwave had 9 seconds left, and the mac and cheese was at that critical stage where if you stop it too early, the middle is still cold, and if you wait too long, the edges turn into something that belongs in a museum of culinary regret. I am not the kind of person who answers numbers I do not recognize. I have received too many calls about my car's extended warranty to maintain that kind of optimism. I let unknown numbers go to voicemail, the way I let check engine lights go uninvestigated, with commitment, but something made me pick up. I do not have a word for it. It was not intuition. It was not a sign from God, though Wanda would later insist it was. It was more like the feeling you get when you are standing on a train platform and you hear the rail hum before you see anything coming. Something was arriving. I did not know what. I picked up. The voice on the other end was female, measured and familiar in a way I could not immediately place. Clipped sentences. No warmth, but no hostility either. Like a woman who had rehearsed what she was about to say and was sticking to the script because going off book would mean feeling something she was not prepared to feel. It was Meredith, Jordan's wife. She said Nyla had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia 3 weeks ago. She said the oncology team at Emory Children's Hospital in Atlanta was evaluating treatment protocols and that one of the options being discussed was a bone marrow transplant. She said they needed family members tested for HLA compatibility. She said Jordan did not know she was making this call. She said she was calling anyway. I was holding a mug, not the world's okayest mom mug. That one was on a shelf in my apartment where I could see it every morning, as a reminder that irony is the only decoration I can afford. This was an office mug, beige chipped handle, with the words, "I survived another meeting," that could have been an email printed on the side in a font that was trying too hard. It slipped out of my hand and hit the break room tile and shattered into 4 pieces, and the mac and cheese I had been microwaving became irrelevant because I was standing in a puddle of orange cheese sauce, watching it run toward the baseboard. Like I had never seen a liquid move before. Leukemia. Nyla. 9 years old. The words settled into my body the way cold water settles into your chest when you jump into a lake without preparing. It does not ask, it just arrives. And suddenly, everything else, the microwave, the mac and cheese, the quarterly report my boss needed by Friday, the parking spot I had finally upgraded to pavement, all of it became noise. Background static on a frequency I could no longer hear. Meredith was still talking. She was saying something about the testing process, about scheduling, about medical coordinators. I was not listening. I was doing math. 245 miles to Atlanta. I could be there by morning if I left by 5. Then she said one more thing. Quiet. Almost an afterthought, except it was not an afterthought at all. It was the most precise sentence she had spoken in the entire call. Miles asks about you. Nyla does not. The line went dead. I stood there in the break room with a broken mug at my feet and cheese sauce on my shoes and a phone pressed to my ear that was no longer connected to anyone. The microwave beeped. It had been beeping for a while. The mac and cheese was ready. I was not. Miles asks about you. Nyla does not. 2 children. Same house. Same father feeding them the same story about the mother who left. And one of them held on to something the story could not reach, and the other one let go, or was made to. I do not know which is worse. The child who still asks, knowing the answer will not come, or the child who stopped asking because the answer she was given was enough to make her stop wanting one. I did not think about it. Not for 1 second. I called Emory Children's Hospital from the break room floor, standing in a puddle of mac and cheese surrounded by ceramic shards, and asked how to register as a potential bone marrow donor for a patient named Nyla Carter Webb. The woman on the phone asked my relationship to the patient. I said I was her mother. She paused. I could hear her typing. She said they would need to verify that with the patient's guardian. I said I understood. I gave her my name, my number, my date of birth, and everything else she asked for, standing in cheese sauce, and I did not care. Dr. Adebayo walked in. He stopped in the doorway and looked at the floor, then at me, then at the floor again, the way a man looks at a situation he is contractually obligated to address, but personally would prefer to ignore. Everything okay? I told him I needed next Monday off. He asked what for. I told him I needed to drive to Atlanta to find out if my bone marrow was worth more than my ex-husband thinks I am. He did not laugh. I did. Wanda appeared in the doorway behind him. Because Wanda has a gift for materializing in doorways at exactly the right moment, like a woman who has been placed on this earth specifically to witness things, and then comment on them later with devastating accuracy. She looked at the cheese sauce. She looked at the broken mug. She looked at me. She laughed too. Dr. Adebayo did not. He was already thinking about the quarterly report. I could see it in his eyes. The quiet calculation of a man who had just promoted someone who was about to become a scheduling problem. But that was a concern for future Denise. Present Denise had a phone call to confirm, a Florida mop, and a daughter 245 miles south who needed something I might be able to give. And somewhere on the 6th floor of Emory Children's Hospital, in a room with plastic chairs and a cartoon germ in a top hat, a test result was waiting. I just did not know yet what it was going to say. Or how completely it was going to rewrite the meaning of every single thing that had happened in the last 11 years. The drive from Charlotte to Emory Children's Hospital in Atlanta is 245 miles, most of it on Interstate 85 South, which on a Monday morning moves at a speed best described as Southern patience. That means you are technically going somewhere, but the journey involves a great deal of faith and at least 3 moments where you consider pulling into a Cracker Barrel just to feel something other than highway hypnosis. It rained the entire way. Not the kind of rain that commits to being a storm, the kind that sits on your windshield like it is thinking about it. The wipers went back and forth for 4 hours, and I went back and forth with them, between determination and the quiet certainty that I was driving towards something I was not ready for. I parked on the 3rd level of the garage, $18. I wrote it on the back of a gas receipt because I had started tracking every cent the way Jordan used to track my grocery spending, except when I did it, it was survival, not surveillance. Gas, $62. Parking, $18. Granola bar from the glove compartment because the hospital cafeteria charged prices that suggested a personal vendetta against the families of sick children. Total cost per trip, approximately $174. I would make this drive 4 times before it was over. I did the math once, and then I stopped doing the math, because some numbers are better left uncounted. The lobby of Emory Children's Hospital smelled like floor cleaner, and that particular species of anxiety that only exists in places where children are sick and parents are holding it together with coffee and eye contact and the silent agreement not to fall apart in the hallway. Every smile in that lobby was load-bearing. Every good morning was a structural support beam. I signed in at the reception desk and gave my name. The woman behind the counter was mid-50s, reading glasses on a chain, fingernails painted a coral that was entirely too cheerful for the setting. She typed something, paused, typed again. Then she looked at me, with an expression I recognized because I had seen it on the faces of people delivering bad news in polite packaging for most of my adult life. There was a note in the system from Mr. Webb. Contact with me was to be limited to medical procedures only. I was authorized for lab work in the East Wing. Visitation to the patient's room required his written approval. He put a note in my medical file. Like I was a biohazard. Like the woman whose bone marrow might save his daughter's life, needed a permission slip from the man who had told that daughter her mother chose to leave. If irony were a sport, Jordan Webb would have a trophy case. Actually, no. He would be the man who takes credit for the trophy case, while someone else built it, polished it, and stocked it with trophies he never earned, which is essentially how our marriage worked now that I think about it. I did not argue. I signed the forms. I went to the East Wing. A phlebotomist named Keisha, with steady hands and box braids that reached her waist, drew 4 vials of blood while making conversation about the Panthers' draft strategy, which I appreciated because it meant I could pretend to be a person who had opinions about football instead of a person whose hands were trembling. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. She looked at me the way Wanda looks at expired medication and said, and drew the 4th vial without further comment. On my way out, walking past the pediatric ward on the 6th floor because I could not help myself, and self-control has never been my strongest trait, when my children are on the other side of a wall, I saw him, Miles, in the hallway, running the way 7-year-old boys run indoors, which is to say at full speed with no awareness of obstacles or consequences. He had a juice box in one hand and a crumpled napkin in the other, and he was headed somewhere with the urgency of a person who had been told to come right back and had no intention of doing so. He stopped. Not because someone told him to, because he saw me. He stood in the middle of that hallway with his juice box and his napkin and his sneakers that had a light-up sole on the left foot but not the right because the battery had died and nobody had replaced it. And he looked at me. Not with recognition, not with fear, with something in between. The face of a child trying to remember why a stranger's face feels like a room he used to live in. He did not say anything. He just stood there, tilting his head slightly, the way he used to tilt his head as a toddler when he was trying to figure out how a toy worked. I was the toy. The broken one someone had put on a high shelf, and he was trying to remember who had put it there and why. Meredith appeared from Nyla's room. She put a hand on Miles's shoulder and guided him back down the hallway. He looked back once, just once, over his shoulder. Then they turned the corner, and he was gone. Through the cracked door, maybe 4 inches open, I could see Nyla, thinner than the photo in my wallet, IV line in her left arm, hair shorter but still dark. She was propped up on pillows, and she was looking right at me through that 4-inch gap with an expression I could not read. Not anger, not relief, something guarded, something built. Then she turned toward the wall. And that was worse than anything Jordan had ever texted me. Because his cruelty was a choice he made with his thumbs on a screen, Nyla's silence was something he had constructed, brick by brick, over 3 years of bedtime stories where I was the villain who chose to leave. Meredith intercepted me at the elevator. She was direct. She told me she had been their mother for the last 2 years, that whatever happened with this test did not change what she had built with them. Her voice was flat. Her arms were crossed. She was terrified. I could see it in the circles under her eyes, the chipped polish on her index finger, the way she held her jaw like she was keeping something inside it besides teeth. "I am here for Nyla," I said. "That is all." She held my eyes for 1 second, then she turned and walked back into the room. I stood in that hallway listening to the hum of fluorescent lights and the squeak of nurses' shoes and thought about how 2 women who loved the same children could not even share an elevator. The coffee in that hospital cafeteria, by the way, was a crime against the concept of beverages. I have worked in a medical office for 6 years. I have tasted coffee brewed at dawn and reheated at dusk. But Emory Children's cafeteria coffee tasted like someone dissolved a parking ticket in warm water and charged $4 for the experience. I drank every drop, because it was warm, and I needed something to hold besides my own thoughts. 6 days. That is how long it takes to find out whether your blood is the thing that saves your daughter's life or just another part of you that was not enough. 6 days of checking your phone like it owes you money. 6 days of eating meals you do not taste and rearranging your desk twice because your hands need a task or they will start doing things on their own, like opening a search engine at 2 in the morning and typing questions that no person should read by the light of a phone screen while lying on a mattress they bought from a clearance warehouse. I Googled things. Bone marrow compatibility rates, HLA marker explanations, survival statistics for pediatric acute lymphoblastic leukemia that I read with one eye closed as though that would make the numbers less real. I read a medical journal article that used the phrase 5-year event-free survival, and I stared at those words for a long time trying to understand how someone could put 5-year and survival in the same sentence about a 9-year-old and call it clinical language. I closed the laptop. I opened it again 7 minutes later. I am not a person who can leave a question unanswered, even when the answer is something I am not equipped to carry. Day 2, I reorganized the filing cabinet at work. Nobody asked me to, nobody needed me to. But the files were in alphabetical order by patient last name, and I decided they should also be color-coded by insurance provider, which was unnecessary and time-consuming, and exactly the kind of project a person invents when they need to control something, anything, because the one thing they actually need to control is 245 miles away in a hospital bed with an IV drip. Day 3, Wanda brought me lunch. Leftover jollof of rice in a Tupperware container with a sticky note on the lid that said, "Eat this, stop Googling." I do not know how she knew I had been Googling. Wanda operates on a frequency of perception that science has not yet identified. I ate the rice. It was perfect. I did not stop Googling. Day 4, Dr. Adebayo called me into his office. The Febreze was fresh, which meant he had sprayed it recently, which meant whatever he was about to say was important enough to prepare the room for. He told me the quarterly report review had been moved up to next week. He said he needed me in the office every day. He said this was a critical period for the practice. He said critical period, the way people say final warning when they do not want to use those actual words. His eyes were doing that thing where they look at you but are also calculating something behind you, like a man measuring whether the bridge can hold the weight before he asks you to walk across it. I nodded. I said, of course. I meant it. For about 11 hours. Because on day 6, at 3:22 in the afternoon, while I was sitting at my desk pretending to review a claims spreadsheet that I had been staring at without reading for 40 minutes, my phone rang. Emory Children's Hospital. Dr. Nwosu's office. A woman with a calm voice and the practiced neutrality of someone who makes these calls several times a week told me they would like me to come in tomorrow to discuss my test results. She said Mr. Webb would also be present. She asked if 10:30 worked. I said yes. I hung up. I sat very still for approximately 90 seconds. Then I picked up my bag, walked to the parking lot, got in the Toyota, drove to the CVS on Central Avenue, parked in the third spot from the entrance, and hyperventilated in a location with decent lighting and a clear sight line to the pharmacy drive-thru, because if I was going to have a panic attack, I was going to do it somewhere practical. There is a specific kind of dread that lives in the phrase "we need to discuss your results in person." Nobody calls you into an office to deliver good news face-to-face. Good news is a phone call. Good news is a voicemail that starts with congratulations. In person means someone has arranged chairs and probably a box of tissues, and they want to make sure you are sitting down when the floor disappears. I did not know yet that the floor was about to disappear for someone, just not the person I expected. I called Wanda from the CVS parking lot. My hands were shaking. The steering wheel was wet because I had been gripping it, and apparently panic makes your palms think they are at a swimming pool. I told her they wanted me in Atlanta tomorrow. With Jordan. Wanda was quiet for 3 seconds, which for Wanda is the equivalent of a 20-minute deliberation. Then she said she would handle Adebayo. I told her he was going to fire me. She said he was going to try to fire me, and then she was going to remind him that she was the only person in that building who knew where the 2024 billing reconciliation files were stored, and that those files were organized in a system she invented that involved color-coded tabs and a labeling method she had never written down, and that if she left, those files would be as useful as a phone book in a language nobody speaks. God bless Wanda Price. That woman weaponized administrative knowledge the way other people use law degrees. She could not file a motion, but she could make a man reconsider a termination with nothing but a filing cabinet and the threat of institutional memory loss. Trip number 2, 245 miles, $18 parking. I was down to $8,100 in savings. I was also down to 1 clean blazer, 2 granola bars, and approximately 0 emotional reserves. But you do not put those on a spreadsheet. You just get in the car and drive south and hope that whatever is waiting in that room is something you can survive. I am getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened in that room. The one on the 6th floor, with the plastic chairs and the cartoon germ and the poster that has been there since 2012. The room where 5 words turned everything inside out. Same 6th floor, same latex glove smell. Same hand hygiene poster with the cartoon germ and the top hat and the smiley face sticker someone had stuck on it years ago that nobody had bothered to remove because apparently everyone in this hospital had accepted that infection control could be whimsical. I mention these details again, not because they matter, but because when your life is about to change, your brain grabs onto the small things, the crack in the chair, the hum of the vent, the way the fluorescent light above Dr. Nwosu's desk flickered every 40 seconds like it was trying to send a message in Morse code that nobody in the room could read. I was in the chair closest to the door, same chair, same instinct. Jordan was against the far wall, arms crossed, jaw set, doing the posture of a man who is absolutely in control of the situation, while his left foot tapped a rhythm on the linoleum that said otherwise. Meredith sat near the door on the opposite side, legs crossed at the ankle, hands in her lap, watching Dr. Nwosu the way a person watches a weather forecast when they already know it is going to rain and are just waiting to hear how bad. Dr. Nwosu opened the folder. She was wearing the same calm expression she had worn the first time I sat in this room, but it had shifted slightly, the way a house shifts on its foundation after years of settling. Still standing. But something underneath had moved. She looked at me first. Again. And again I knew that meant the news was about to land on someone else. "Miss Carter," she said, "your HLA results show a haploidentical match with Nyla. 50% marker compatibility. That is exactly what we would expect from a biological mother. You are a viable donor candidate." I exhaled. I did not realize I had been holding my breath for 6 days, but apparently my lungs had been keeping a tally and they wanted payment in full. Viable. I was viable. My bone marrow was worth something. That word settled into my chest like a warm stone. Jordan uncrossed his arms. "Good. So she can donate. What is the issue?" Dr. Nwosu paused. Not a dramatic pause. A clinical one. The kind of pause a doctor takes when she is selecting words the way a surgeon selects instruments. Carefully, precisely, with full awareness that the wrong choice will cause damage that cannot be undone. "Mr. Webb," she said, "your results show 0 matching HLA markers with Nyla." She let that sit. 0. Not low, not partial. 0. The medical equivalent of a door that does not just close but was never there in the first place. For a biological father, she continued, that is medically impossible. The room changed, not physically. The walls did not move, the vent did not stop humming, the fluorescent light still flickered on its 40-second cycle. But something in the air shifted, the way pressure changes before a storm, when you can feel the weather turning even though the sky has not decided what it is going to do yet. Jordan's face did something I had never seen it do. And I have seen that face in a lot of situations. I have seen it react to a Panthers fourth-quarter collapse. I have seen it respond to his mother's critique of his grilling technique, which nearly caused a Thanksgiving incident in 2020. I have seen it handle a parking ticket, a delayed flight, and a waiter who brought the wrong steak. But I had never, not once in 11 years, seen it do what it did in that room. It was not anger. It was not confusion. It was the face of a man standing on a floor that had just disappeared and who had not yet started falling. He is not their biological father. 5 words. Dr. Nwosu said them the way you read a lab result. Factual, measured, final. But those 5 words landed on that room like a detonation wrapped in a manila folder. Everything Jordan had built, the custody case, the devoted father testimony, the character references, the restraining order, the text messages telling me my children did not ask about me, all of it was sitting on a foundation that had just cracked down the center. Jordan grabbed the edge of the desk. That is insane. Run it again. We ran it twice, Mr. Webb. He started to say something about being present at every appointment, every ultrasound, every single one, but Dr. Nwosu was not in the business of arguing with patients about the difference between attendance and biology. She explained that the results were conclusive, that I was the biological mother, that he was not the biological father. That donor material had been used during the IVF process, whether intentionally or through error, and that determining the cause was not within her scope. What was within her scope was Mia's treatment. I was a viable donor. They should proceed with scheduling. Jordan turned to me. His eyes had the look of an animal that has just realized the cage door was always open, but the space outside is worse than the space inside. Wild, cornered, searching for someone to blame because that is what Jordan does when the ground moves. He finds the nearest woman and points. What did you do? I did not flinch. I did not do anything, Jordan. I was at every appointment, every injection, every ultrasound, every single one. Meredith stood up. She did not say a word. She just stood there, looking at Jordan with an expression I recognized immediately because I had worn it myself. The expression of a woman recalculating every conversation she has ever had with a man and arriving at a different total. That expression does not feel like anger. It feels like swallowing ice. Jordan pulled his phone from his pocket and walked into the hallway. Through the closing door, I heard him say one word. Stafford. Not his lawyer, not his mother, not what happened, or this is wrong, or any of the things a man says when he has been blindsided. He said a name, a specific name. The way you say a name, when you have always known there was a question, and you have always known who had the answer. And in that moment, standing in a room that smelled like latex and the aftermath of a lie that had held for 11 years, I understood everything. He knew. He always knew. All right, hold on a second. Someone from Georgia commented on my last video at 2 a.m, said she was sitting in a hospital waiting room eating vending machine crackers, and this channel was the only thing keeping her from completely losing it. That one stayed with me for days. So if you have not subscribed yet, please do it now and drop a comment. Tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. You would be surprised how many of you are up at 3 a.m. I am starting to think this channel runs on insomnia and vending machine snacks. Okay, back to this. Here is the thing about finding out your entire life was built on a document you never signed. There is no instruction manual, there is no customer service number. You cannot return the last 11 years for store credit. You cannot call a helpline and say, "Excuse me, the man I married secretly used another man's genetic material to create my children without telling me, and then spent a decade performing fatherhood like a one-man show he wrote, directed, and starred in. And I would like to speak with a manager. There is no manager. There is just you, sitting in a Toyota Corolla in a hospital parking garage on the 3rd level, staring at a concrete wall, trying to figure out which direction is forward, when every direction you have ever known just turned out to be a hallway built by someone who lied about where it led. I sat there for a long time. Engine off. Check engine light off too, which is the only time that light was not glowing when the car was not running, which felt like a metaphor I did not have the energy to unpack. The concrete wall in front of me had a crack running diagonally from the floor to about shoulder height. I stared at it and thought about how cracks start, small, invisible, underground. And by the time you see them, the foundation has already shifted. Dr. Brent Stafford, Morehouse, golf buddy. The man who shook Jordan's hand in the fertility clinic lobby with that extra second of grip and the eye contact that said, "We are in this together." I replayed that handshake in my head, and it looked different now. Not friendly, conspiratorial. The grin of a man who already had a plan and was shaking hands with the man who had asked him to execute it. I had stood in that lobby holding my purse and my hope and my trust, and I had watched 2 men greet each other like teammates, and I had smiled because I thought they were on my team too. I was not on the team. I was the equipment. Jordan knew he was infertile. He had known before the IVF. He had known when he suggested it. He had known when he called Stafford from a golf course and arranged everything before telling me. He had known when he sat next to me in that consultation room and nodded along while Stafford explained the protocol. He had known when I signed that form with the sticky arrows pointing to my name. He had known, and he had handed me a pen and watched me sign a document that said one thing while he signed a document that said something else entirely. 11 years, every diaper I changed, every fever I sat up with, every school pickup, every bedtime story, every Sunday night voicemail I left crying into a phone that went straight to a blocked number. All of it happened inside a lie he built around me, like a room with no windows. And I had lived in that room and decorated it and called it my life, and never once looked for a door because I did not know there was a door to look for. I do not know how long I sat in that parking garage. Long enough for the concrete to go from gray to darker gray as the daylight outside the structure shifted. Long enough for my phone to buzz 3 times. I did not check it. I was not ready to be a person who checked things yet. I was still being a person who sat very still and tried to understand how the same hands that held my daughter in the delivery room were the same hands that had signed away the truth about who she was. Then Jordan made his move. Because Jordan always made a move. That was his gift. Not fatherhood, not honesty, strategy. The man could not change a diaper without consulting his mother, but he could mobilize a legal team with the efficiency of a man who had been planning for the walls to come down and had already built a bunker. His lawyer, not Odom this time, someone new, someone whose name I would later learn was Barrett Cross, filed an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order. The argument was clean and familiar because it used the same playbook as the custody case. I was exploiting a family medical crisis to harass his client. My presence at the hospital was aggressive and unwelcome. My behavior was erratic, consistent with a documented history of emotional instability. Documented history. He meant the therapy sessions, the ones he had told me to start, the ones where I had sat in a chair and told a licensed professional the truth about my life, and every word of that truth had been filed away and was now being used as evidence that I could not be trusted with my own children. He had handed me the match, and then he had used the fire as proof that I was dangerous. The process server found me at the Emory parking lot on a Tuesday at 3:47 in the afternoon. A Tuesday. Of course it was a Tuesday. The man handed me the papers next to my Toyota, which still had its check engine light and now had a windshield crack that had grown another inch since the divorce, because even my car was deteriorating in solidarity with my life. I signed. He left. He did not make eye contact. I do not blame him. I would not have wanted to look at me either. 500 feet. That was the distance. I could not go within 500 feet of Nyla or Miles without Jordan's written consent. I could not call them. I could not visit the hospital floor where Nyla was receiving chemotherapy. The donor matching process could continue through the hospital's medical coordinator only. My bone marrow was welcome. The rest of me was not. I sat in that Toyota. I did not start the engine. I did not cry. Not yet. I just sat there watching rain collect on the windshield, each drop joining the one before it, building a sheet of water that blurred the parking garage wall into something soft and shapeless, and I thought he did it again. He used the system. He used a judge and a piece of paper and the word unstable to build a wall between me and my children. Different parking lot, different year, same man, same trick. Same helplessness settling into my chest like a tenant who knows the lease is long and has no intention of leaving. I drove to Wanda's house. It was a Tuesday. Of course it was. Everything in my life that matters, good or catastrophic, happens on a Tuesday. I stood at her kitchen sink, and I fell apart. Wanda's kitchen on West Boulevard always smelled like something had either just finished cooking or was about to start. That night it smelled like collard greens simmering in a pot with smoked turkey necks and the kind of love that does not ask questions before it feeds you. Her two boys were in the living room, arguing about something on a screen with the volume turned up high enough to make the walls vibrate, and her cat, a gray tabby named Deacon, who had the personality of a retired judge, was sitting on the counter watching me with the detached concern of a creature who had seen people fall apart before and had decided long ago that it was not his problem. I did not cry gracefully. I need you to understand that. I did not stand at her sink with a single tear rolling down one cheek while soft lighting made me look noble and resilient. I cried the way you cry when you are 36 years old and every system that was supposed to protect you has been turned into a weapon by the same man, and you are standing in your best friend's kitchen in socks because she makes everyone take off their shoes at the door even during emotional emergencies because her floors are hardwood and she just had them refinished, and trauma does not override floor care in Wanda Price's house. I cried until my glasses fogged up. I cried until my nose ran. I cried into a kitchen towel she handed me because she could not find the tissue box, and that towel had a printed illustration of a sunrise and the words "blessed and highly favored" in gold cursive, which is the kind of towel that exists in every black woman's kitchen in the South and usually hangs untouched on the oven handle as decoration, not function, but desperate times call for desperate textiles. That is rock bottom. When you are sobbing into novelty kitchenware with a Bible quote on it while a cat judges you from the counter, you have arrived. Maybe I should stop, I said. My voice sounded like something that had been left out in the rain. Every time I try to be in their lives, he files something. Nyla will not even look at me. She turned to the wall, Wanda. She looked at me and turned to the wall. Maybe he is right. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe everything Beverly said at Thanksgiving was true. Maybe motherhood is not for everyone, and maybe it is specifically not for me. Wanda did not hug me. She did not tell me it was going to be okay. She did not hand me a platitude wrapped in a Bible verse, which honestly I was bracing for because the woman has scripture loaded at all times like a spiritual firearm. Instead, she turned off the burner under the collard greens. She walked to the cabinet above the refrigerator, the one she had to stand on her toes to reach, and pulled down a tin of loose-leaf tea, the strong kind her church sister Grace ships from Lagos twice a year, the kind that tastes like earth and iron and the accumulated resilience of every woman who has ever been underestimated. She boiled water. She poured 2 cups. She set one in front of me. She sat down across the table, and she looked at me the way she had been looking at me for 6 years, like a woman who already knows what you are capable of and is simply waiting for you to figure it out yourself. "Girl," she said, "you are the only person in that building who matched. The only one. Not Jordan, not Meredith, not his mother, not his lawyer, not any of the people who stood in that courtroom 3 years ago and said he was Father of the Year. You are that child's one shot at a donor in her own family. You think that is a coincidence?" She leaned forward. "You think that is harassment? You think God made your bone marrow match your daughter's DNA so that a man with a restraining order could keep you away from her?" She shook her head. Slow, the way she shook it when someone at church brought store-bought potato salad to the potluck and tried to pass it off as homemade, disapproval with theological undertones. "That is not harassment, Denise. That is biology calling collect, and it does not care about his restraining order." I held the tea with both hands. It was hot enough to burn, but I did not let go because the heat was the most real thing I had felt in hours, and I needed something to anchor me to the present before I floated back into the place where Jordan's voice lived, the one that said I was the problem, The one that said, "My children did not ask about me." The one that had been playing on a loop in my skull for 3 years like the world's worst podcast. Wanda was not done. She never is. She took a sip of her tea and set it down and said, "Now, let me tell you something practical. Because faith is good, but faith with a plan is better." She told me about Gloria, a woman at Mount Zion AME, sang in the alto section, wore hats that could be seen from the parking lot, worked in medical records management at a hospital in Atlanta. Wanda and Gloria had been at the same Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago, and over peach cobbler, Gloria had explained that when medical practices close in the state of Georgia, patient records do not disappear. They are transferred by law to either the State Department of Community Health or a designated custodian practice. The records are preserved, they are accessible, they exist. Somewhere in a file cabinet, in a custodian practice in some small town I had never heard of, there was a box with my name and Jordan's name and 2 consent forms that were not the same document. And the law said those records still existed. And Wanda knew the woman who knew how to find them. I set down the tea. I looked at Wanda. The question in my head shifted. It had been, should I give up for 3 years? It had been playing so long it had worn a groove in my brain like a record stuck in the same rotation. But sitting in that kitchen, with the collard greens cooling on the stove and the cat watching, and the towel drying my tears with the word blessed pressed against my cheek, the needle moved, the record skipped. And the new question was different. How do I fight? Wanda called Gloria on a Wednesday morning before the sun was fully committed to being up. Gloria called the Georgia Department of Community Health before lunch. By Thursday afternoon, we had confirmation that the patient records from Peachtree Reproductive Center, the clinic on Peachtree Dunwoody Road, where I had signed a form with sticky arrows and trusted a man who shook my husband's hand like they shared a playbook, had been transferred to a custodian practice in Bloomington, Georgia. Bloomington is the kind of town where the post office and the gas station share a parking lot, and the welcome sign looks like it was painted by someone who meant well, but ran out of budget halfway through the second coat. Population somewhere around 400. The entire town could fit inside a Costco and still have room for the sample stations. Before the records, though, I had to try the front door, the one that no longer existed. I drove to the old clinic address on a Saturday, 4 hours south to Atlanta. The building was still there, second floor of the same medical office complex, but the suite that used to be Peachtree Reproductive Center was now a boutique fitness studio. The kind with exposed brick and neon signs that say things like "sweat is just fat crying" and a chalkboard out front advertising a $42 spin class. $42 for a stationary bicycle. In the exact room where my children were conceived under false pretenses. I stood on the sidewalk and stared at it for a while, thinking about how this country will turn anything into a spin class if you give it enough time and enough exposed brick. Dead end, I Googled Stafford. Found him in Savannah. New practice. New name on the door. Mountain to Sea Reproductive Health, which sounded like a resort and probably charged like one too. I called. The receptionist told me Dr. Stafford was not available for calls regarding former patients. I asked if I could leave a message. She said she would pass it along. She did not pass it along. I know because I called 3 more times over 2 weeks, and each time received the same polished refusal delivered with slightly increasing impatience, like a customer service script being read by someone who was starting to take it personally. I was not calling about a warranty. I was calling about my children. There is a difference. But apparently it does not matter when the receptionist has been trained to say no with a smile you can hear through the phone. That is when Wanda made her second move. The woman operated like a chess player who only needed 3 pieces to win. She called her cousin Diane, who went to a church in Decatur, whose pastor's wife knew a woman named Patricia Ehejerica, who was a reproductive rights attorney in Midtown Atlanta, and who had apparently spent the last 15 years making men in lab coats very uncomfortable in courtrooms across the Southeast. I called Pat on a Tuesday. Of course I did. Patricia Ehejerica was 53 years old, Nigerian-American, and walked into rooms the way a storm walks into a coastline with full knowledge of what it was about to rearrange and absolutely no interest in apologizing for it. She was 5'3", which I mention only because it made her energy even more impressive, like discovering that the thunder you have been hearing was coming from a house cat. Her office was on the 4th floor of a building in Midtown Atlanta, with the kind of elevator that made you pray between floors. Her desk was immaculate. Her handshake could crack a walnut. She listened to the entire story without interrupting. 22 minutes. I timed it because I was sitting across from a woman whose hourly rate I could not afford, and I wanted to know exactly how much silence cost. At the end, she uncapped a pen and said 4 words. I will take this case. Pro bono for the custody challenge, contingency for the fertility fraud claim. She told me that if what I was describing was what she believed it was, this was not just a custody reversal, it was criminal. She said criminal the way a chef says rare. With precision and the confidence of someone who has done this before and knows exactly how it ends. Pat filed a subpoena for the records at the Bloomington custodian practice. 8 days later, a box arrived at her office. Inside that box, on page 51 of a file labeled Webb Carter IVF Cycle 2, was a consent form. Authorization for the use of donor sperm. Reason cited, severe oligospermia. Patient sperm non-viable for intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Signature line, Jordan Webb. That same loopy capital J I had seen on 1,000 permission slips and 1 divorce settlement. Page 52, a different form. Consent for assisted reproductive procedure. Standard language. Clinical phrasing. No mention of donor sperm. No mention of oligospermia. No mention of another man's genetic material being combined with my eggs to create the 2 children I had carried, delivered, fed, bathed, read to, cried over, lost, and spent 3 years leaving voicemails for every Sunday at 8:15. Signature line, Denise Carter. 2 forms, same procedure, same clinic, same date. One said the truth, the other said nothing, and my name was on the one that said nothing. I stared at those 2 pages sitting side by side on Pat's immaculate desk for so long, the words blurred. 2 pieces of paper. That is all it took to summarize 11 years of a lie so quiet I never heard it. I had signed where the sticky arrows pointed. I had trusted the man sitting next to me. And the form I signed was not the form that told the truth. It was the form that made sure I would never know. I spent 3 years thinking I lost my kids because I was not good enough. Turns out I lost them because a man from a Morehouse alumni mixer could not admit that his body did not work the way he wanted it to, and instead of telling his wife the truth, he called his golf buddy, signed 1 form, created a different one for me, and then spent the next decade performing fatherhood like a man rehearsing for a role he never actually earned. You want to know what fertility fraud looks like? It does not look like a villain in a movie. It looks like 2 pieces of paper that should be the same document and are not. It looks like your name on one page and the truth on another, and they were never on the same page. Literally. Patricia Ihajirika's office smelled like printer, toner, and conviction. Her desk was clean enough to perform surgery on. Her whiteboard was the size of a small door, and it had clearly been used recently, because there were ghost marks from previous cases that had been erased, but not completely, which made it look like a palimpsest of other people's worst days. She picked up a red marker the way some people pick up weapons, with familiarity and absolutely no hesitation, and she started writing. Point 1. 2 different consent forms for the same IVF procedure. Jordan's form explicitly authorized the use of donor sperm citing severe oligospermia. My form made no mention of donor sperm at all. That is fertility fraud and document fraud under both Georgia and North Carolina state law. Point 2. HLA results from Emory Children's Hospital confirming that I am the biological mother, and Jordan is not the biological father of either child. Point 3. Jordan's sworn testimony in the 2023 custody proceeding in which he referred to himself under oath, twice, as the biological father of Nyla and Miles. If he knew about the donor sperm, and his signature on a form authorizing it strongly suggests he did, that is perjury and fraud upon the court. Point 4. The fraternity and social connection between Jordan and the embryologist, Dr. Brent Stafford, Morehouse alumni, golf partners. The kind of relationship that does not end up in a fertility clinic by accident. Point 5. Jordan's emergency restraining order filed after the HLA results came back. Filed not to protect his children, but to prevent me from accessing the information that would expose his lie. That is not protection, that is obstruction. Point 6. And this one she circled twice. Stafford had been sued before, another family, similar circumstances. The case was settled out of court with a non-disclosure agreement, which means there was a pattern. Which means this was not a one-time error or a lapse in judgment. This was a practice. Pat capped the marker. She looked at the whiteboard the way an architect looks at a blueprint. 6 points, 6 nails, 1 coffin. He was not protecting his children, she said. He was protecting his lie. She filed 3 motions in the same week. 1, a motion to vacate the 2023 custody order on the basis of fraud upon the court. 2, a referral to the Mecklenburg County District Attorney regarding fertility fraud and perjury. 3, a formal complaint with the Georgia Composite Medical Board regarding Dr. Stafford's conduct and the prior NDA-sealed case. 3 filings, 3 agencies. Jordan's lawyer was going to need a bigger office and possibly a different career. The hearing was on a Thursday in Mecklenburg County Family Court. Same courthouse where I got married in 2013. Same courthouse where I lost custody in 2023. 3rd time in the same building. I was beginning to develop a relationship with that courthouse the way some people develop relationships with hospitals or airports, not by choice, but by the accumulation of events that keep dragging you back to the same door. I wore my best blazer, the one from TJ Maxx. $28, navy blue. There was a loose thread on the right cuff that I had been meaning to trim for 3 weeks, but had not because I had been busy assembling the legal scaffolding to dismantle a decade of fraud and thread maintenance, had not made the priority list. That thread was still holding on, which I respected because I was also still holding on, and neither of us was doing it gracefully, but we were doing it. Jordan showed up in a suit that cost more than my monthly rent. But here is the thing about expensive suits. They do not come with a defense against your own signature on a document you hoped nobody would ever find. You can tailor the fabric. You cannot tailor the facts. Pat opened with the binder, tabbed, color-coded, laminated dividers, section markers with printed labels. I am fairly certain she had a table of contents. Patricia Ihajirika did not do things halfway. I am convinced that woman organized her refrigerator by food group and expiration date and had a system for rotating leftovers that would make a military quartermaster weep with admiration. She presented the 2 consent forms side by side. She presented the HLA results. She presented the transcript from the 2023 custody hearing with Jordan's sworn testimony highlighted in yellow. She presented the connection between Jordan and Stafford. She presented the restraining order timeline. She handed the judge a binder that could have doubled as a graduate thesis on how one man systematically built a life on a lie and then used the legal system to protect it. The judge was a woman in her early 60s, African American. Silver hair cut close. Reading glasses, she kept pushing up her nose with her index finger, which I found oddly comforting, like a metronome. She took the binder. She opened it. She read. The courtroom was the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums, the kind of quiet where you can hear someone swallow 3 rows back, the kind of quiet that exists only in rooms where a decision is being formed behind someone's eyes and everyone else is waiting to find out which direction it falls. She read for a long time. She turned pages slowly. She looked at the 2 forms. She looked at Jordan. She pushed her glasses up. "Mr. Webb," she said, "you signed a consent form authorizing the use of donor sperm during your IVF treatment in 2015. Is that your signature?" Jordan looked at his lawyer. Barrett Cross gave him a small nod, the kind that means say as little as possible and pray it is enough. Yes. And that single syllable, spoken in a courtroom he had once owned, was the first crack in everything he had built. The judge did not pause after his answer. She turned a page in the binder, pushed her glasses up her nose, and kept going with the unhurried precision of a woman who had been doing this long enough to know that silence after a confession is more effective than any follow-up, but that she had follow-ups anyway and intended to use every single one. "And your wife at the time, Miss Carter, signed a different form. One that made no mention of donor sperm, no mention of oligospermia, and no mention of any genetic material other than your own being used in the procedure." She looked at him over the top of her glasses. "Were you aware that the 2 forms were different?" Jordan started to speak, stopped, started again. "I did not handle the paperwork. The clinic handled the paperwork. I assumed everything was—" "Mr. Webb." The judge's voice did not rise. It did not need to. It simply arrived with the authority of a woman who had heard the word assumed in her courtroom enough times to know it was the sound of a man trying to build a ladder out of air. I am not asking what you assumed. I am asking what you knew. Jordan looked at Barrett Cross. Cross did not nod this time. He was staring at the binder the way a man stares at a building he just realized is on fire from the inside. The judge continued. In your 2023 custody petition, you testified under oath twice that you were the biological father of Nyla and Miles. Were you aware at that time that donor sperm had been used during the IVF procedure? Jordan gripped the edge of the table. His knuckles had gone the particular shade of white that happens when a man is holding on to something, not because he needs it for support, but because he needs his hands to have a job that is not shaking. He said something about Stafford telling him it was routine. He said something about standard protocols. He said the word standard the way a man says the word standard when nothing about what he did was standard, and he knows it, and the room knows it, and the woman in the reading glasses absolutely knows it. The judge pushed her glasses up. She made a note. Then she looked at Pat. Pat stood. She buttoned her blazer with the composure of a woman who had been waiting for this particular moment, the way a conductor waits for the downbeat. She said, "Your Honor, we would like to call Beverly Webb." The courtroom shifted. Not loudly, the way a room shifts when air enters it from an unexpected direction. I turned around. Beverly was sitting in the third row of the gallery, wearing a cream-colored blouse and a church hat that probably cost more than my blazer, and her hands were wrapped around her purse with both fists, like she was gripping a steering wheel on a road she had not planned to drive. Beverly Webb had spent 63 years building a reputation as a God-fearing, community-serving, casserole-bringing pillar of the Mount Pleasant neighborhood. She served on 2 church committees. She organized the annual coat drive. She had a handshake that communicated decades of respectability and a smile that could make a pastor feel underdressed. It took Patricia Ehejerica approximately 4 minutes to dismantle all of it. Pat established the timeline. She asked Beverly whether her son had ever been evaluated for fertility issues. Beverly said she did not recall the specifics. Pat asked whether Beverly had been the policyholder on the insurance plan that covered Jordan's initial fertility workup in 2013. Beverly's mouth tightened. She said she might have been. Pat produced the insurance records. Claim filed March 2013. Policyholder Beverly A. Webb. Diagnosis code for male factor infertility. The paper was right there in the binder, tabbed, highlighted, laminated, because Pat Ehejerica did not ask questions she did not already know the answers to. Beverly looked at Jordan. Jordan was looking at the table. He was not going to save her. He had never saved anyone. He only saved himself. And today, even that was not working. "Mrs. Webb," the judge said, "did you know prior to your son's marriage to Miss Carter that he had been diagnosed with a condition that would require the use of donor sperm to conceive children?" The courtroom was still, the kind of still that holds its breath. Beverly closed her eyes. She opened them. And in a voice smaller than any voice I had ever heard come out of that woman, she said, "Yes." One word. And the cream-colored stationery, the character reference letters, the Thanksgiving comments about motherhood not being for everyone, the 3 years of watching me lose my children while she sat in a courtroom and testified on behalf of the man who had lied to me, all of it landed on that single syllable, like a building falling on its own foundation. The judge made her ruling. She did not hurry. She did not need to. She stated that the court found sufficient evidence of fraud upon the court in the original custody proceedings, that the 2023 custody order was vacated pending a full review. That temporary custody of Nyla and Miles was transferred to me effective immediately, that Jordan Webb would retain supervised visitation rights pending further proceedings. She instructed Pat to coordinate with the district attorney's office and the Georgia Medical Board. I did not cheer. I did not cry. I sat in my $28 blazer with the loose thread on the right cuff, the one that had been holding on for 3 weeks, with the same stubbornness I had been holding on with for 3 years. And I felt something I had not felt since before the first courtroom, before the apartment, before the voicemails, before the cardboard box and the check engine light and the gravel parking spot. The ground, solid, underneath me, not shifting, not cracking, not disappearing, just there. Meredith was in the gallery. I turned and saw her face. She was not angry. She was not vengeful. She was doing the math. The same math I had done 3 years ago in this exact courthouse in a cheaper blouse with a tag still on it. She was realizing that the man she had married was not the man she had married. She stood up. She collected her purse, a structured leather bag she held with both hands like a life raft. She walked out. She did not look at Jordan. She did not look at me. She did not look at Beverly. She just walked through the double doors and let them close behind her, and that exit said everything her mouth did not. Jordan sat at the defendant's table. Barrett Cross was whispering something to him, but Jordan was not listening. He was looking at the binder, at the two forms, at his own signature next to the blank truth of a document his wife was never meant to see. And for the first time in 11 years, the man who had controlled everything could not control this. I drove to Emory Children's Hospital for the last time on a Friday morning. 245 miles. Same interstate. Same rain that could not decide what it wanted to be. But this time there was no note in the system. No restriction. No permission slip from a man who had spent a decade pretending to be something biology said he never was. I walked through the lobby and nobody stopped me. I took the elevator to the 6th floor and nobody asked me to leave. Meredith was standing near the water fountain with a cardboard coffee cup she was not drinking. She stepped forward. Not close, just close enough. "I am sorry," she said. "I did not know." 3 years of standing between me and my children, and she put all of it into 5 words that were not an excuse and were not enough, but were honest. I nodded. She nodded. She walked past me toward the elevator and I let her go because there was nothing left to say that either of us had language for. Room 614. The door was open. Miles saw me first. He was sitting in a chair by the window holding a juice box and a coloring book he had not been coloring because he had been watching the door. He saw me, and the juice box hit the floor, and he was off that chair and running before I could take a full breath. He hit my legs at full speed, arms wrapped, face buried, one sneaker still with the dead light-up sole from months ago. "You came back." He said it into my hip, muffled, certain. Like he had been rehearsing that sentence every night and had finally found the person it belonged to. I put my hand on his head and held him and said nothing, because there are moments where words are just noise, and the only language that matters is the weight of a child who chose to run. Nyla was on the bed, thinner than the photo in my wallet. IV line in her left arm, hair shorter. Dark eyes, my mother's eyes, watching me the way a person watches a door they have been told will never open again. Dad said you did not want us anymore. 9 years old. 3 years of blocked calls and unanswered letters and a text that said they do not ask about you anymore. And this is what he gave her. A sentence so clean it sounded like the truth. "Dad was wrong, baby. I never stopped wanting you, not for one single day." She did not hug me. She reached under her pillow and pulled out something I had not seen in 3 years. A phone. My phone. The one that went missing during the divorce. The one Jordan said he had thrown away. The screen was cracked. The case was scuffed, but it was charged, and it was on. "I found it in the garage," she said, "behind the toolbox. I charged it." She looked at me with those dark eyes that belonged to my mother and her mother and every woman in my bloodline who had ever survived something by refusing to stop. "I listened to them every night, Mom. Every single one. The one about the lady and the cantaloupe, the one where you cried on Thanksgiving, the one where you just said goodnight and nothing else. Everyone. I have told you this entire story with humor and sarcasm and metaphors about parking tickets and spin classes, but I do not have a joke for this. My daughter listened to my voice every night for 3 years through a phone she rescued from a garage because it was the only proof she had that I was real. There is no metaphor for that. There is only a woman standing in a hospital room trying not to collapse because her legs have decided that this is the moment they have been waiting to give out. Nyla gave me one small nod. Not forgiveness. Not yet. The beginning of a very long conversation. And that was enough. The bone marrow transplant happened on a Tuesday in late March. I lay on a table in a room colder than any room has a right to be, and a doctor extracted something from inside my body to put inside my daughter's body, and I thought about how biology connects you to people in ways that cannot be seen, cannot be undone, and cannot be signed away on a consent form no matter how many sticky arrows someone puts on the page. Nyla's body accepted the marrow. The doctors used the word responding. Wanda brought a cake that said Marrovellis, and I told her it was the worst pun in the history of language, and she said, "You are welcome," and cut herself the biggest slice. Jordan got supervised visitation every other Saturday, 2 hours. The investigation against Dr. Stafford was opened by the Georgia Composite Medical Board. Pat told me it could take months. I told her I had waited 3 years. Months sounded like a weekend. I got the check engine light fixed, $47, a sensor. 3 years of staring at that orange glow, wondering when everything would fall apart, and it was a $47 sensor. There is probably a lesson in there, but I am not the kind of person who turns car repairs into philosophy. I just paid it and drove home with a dark dashboard for the first time in years. The last time I sat in that hospital room, Nyla was sleeping. Miles was drawing with a crayon broken in half that still worked. I was in a plastic chair, not the one by the door. For the first time, I was not looking for the exit. I was just sitting in a room with my children, breathing, present, and thank God, finally still. So let me ask you something. If the person who took everything from you needed you to save what mattered most, would you show up, or would you let them sit in that waiting room alone? I showed up, and I would do it again tomorrow. Not for him, never for him. For them, always for them. Because that is what a mother does. Not because the court says so. Not because a blood test says so. Because God put something in you that does not care about paperwork or restraining orders or lies told at bedtime. It cares about showing up. Thank God for a woman named Wanda and her tea and her phone call to Gloria. Thank God for Pat and her whiteboard and her binder. And thank God for a 9-year-old girl who found a phone in a garage and pressed play and believed, even when she was told not to, that the voice on the other end was coming back. Thank you for being here. I mean that. Every comment, every subscribe, every person watching from some city at 1 a.m. because sleep did not come and this story did. You keep me going more than you know. There is another story waiting for you right on your screen. Click it. I think you will want to hear what happens next.